Welcome my channel. Today's story is a dramatic twist about a woman forced to choose between her wealthy family and true love. Betrayal, heartbreak, and a shocking comeback. Let's dive in. Eliza Montgomery pressed her phone tighter against her ear, her fingers trembling slightly as she paced along the large window of her design studio in Shoreditch. The early evening sunlight cast long shadows across her desk, where sketches for a new client's townhouse lay abandoned. "I'm sorry, darling, but we've had to cancel the booking at the Glass House," her mother, Lady Evelyn Montgomery, said smoothly, her voice laced with that calm, rehearsed tone she always used when delivering bad news wrapped in civility. Eliza stopped in her tracks, her breath catching. "Cancel? What do you mean, cancel? The engagement party is in 2 weeks. We've already sent the invitations." She could hear her mother exhale gently, like she was the one inconvenienced by Eliza's reaction. "Well, you know how these venues are. The cost was simply, well, unnecessary. Your father and I agreed it's not worth the extravagance for something so premature." The word hung in the air like a slap. Premature. Eliza's chest tightened as she forced herself to stay calm. "We paid a deposit. You approved every detail, every guest. What's changed?" She already knew the answer but needed to hear it aloud. Lady Evelyn hesitated, and Eliza imagined her sitting in their Hampstead Estates grand conservatory, delicately swirling a glass of wine, already dressed for one of her endless charity dinners. "Eliza, darling, you must be realistic. Your engagement to Oliver, well, we've supported it, haven't we? But certain things must be done with consideration. A large, public affair might send the wrong message." There it was, the real reason carefully concealed beneath layers of politeness. Oliver Patel, the man Eliza loved, a brilliant robotics engineer, was the wrong message because he didn't come from wealth or old money. Because unlike every man her family had ever paraded in front of her, he didn't wear tailored suits or boast a last name tied to generations of fortune. "You mean because he's not one of us," Eliza said, her voice low but sharp. "Don't be melodramatic," her mother snapped, dropping her pretense for just a moment. "It's about appearances, Eliza. People will talk. You've worked hard to build your name in design, why undermine it with difficult associations?" Eliza felt a surge of anger rising, her pulse quickening. Oliver had done nothing but love her, support her, and work tirelessly on groundbreaking medical technology. But none of that mattered to them. To her family, what counted was his pedigree, not his heart or mind. "We're not canceling," Eliza said firmly, but her mother only sighed. "It's already done, dear. We'll find something more appropriate. Intimate, quiet." Without waiting for Eliza's response, Lady Evelyn added with finality, "Your father and I will be in touch." The line went dead. Eliza stood frozen in place, staring out at the bustling street below, watching as people hurried past, oblivious to how her entire world had just been upended. The engagement party she had dreamed of, her chance to bring her life and love together in front of family and friends, was gone. Not because of logistics, but because her family had made a choice, and they had chosen their reputation over her happiness. Growing up as a Montgomery meant knowing the weight of a name that opened every door in London's elite circles but came with invisible chains Eliza had fought her whole life to break. From childhood, her days were choreographed to fit into her family's pristine image: ballet lessons, charity luncheons, dinners with titled families whose fortunes stretched back centuries. Her father, Sir Reginald Montgomery, ruled over Montgomery Holdings, one of the largest real estate empires in England, with a sharp eye for power and a cold detachment from anything that didn't serve his interests. Her mother, Lady Evelyn, presided over London's social scene with effortless grace, her life a carousel of galas, art exhibitions, and board meetings for charitable foundations. And then there was Charlotte, Eliza's younger sister, polished, poised, the family jewel groomed to follow in their footsteps without question. Charlotte had glided through Oxford, stepped straight into a corporate law firm, and was now being quietly nudged toward Rupert Ashford, heir to a banking dynasty, a man Eliza privately thought had the warmth of a marble statue. Eliza, on the other hand, had always been the outlier, the one who colored outside the lines. While Charlotte recited law books, Eliza buried herself in design magazines, dreaming of creating beautiful, meaningful spaces, not just decorating mansions but designing community art centers and affordable housing with dignity. Against her father's wishes, she turned down the comfortable, well-paid role he arranged at an architecture firm tied to one of his business partners, and instead opened her own boutique studio in Shoreditch, where creativity and grit mattered more than surnames. Her work flourished, but her family never quite respected it, referring to her career as a little venture rather than a real achievement. Then she met Oliver Patel at a charity art gala she had designed. A night neither of them had wanted to attend. Unlike the sharply dressed financiers swirling their cocktails, Oliver had arrived late, rain-soaked and carrying a worn leather satchel. But when he struck up a conversation about the fusion of technology and design, Eliza had been captivated by his sharp mind, his quiet confidence, and the way he saw her for who she was, not who her family expected her to be. Their first coffee turned into long walks along the Thames, late-night debates, and shared dreams. He was everything the men in her world weren't: humble, genuine, brilliant without arrogance. But from the moment she introduced him to her family, the divide had been clear. At a formal dinner in the Montgomery estate's grand dining room, her father asked cutting questions about Oliver's Indian immigrant parents, about his scholarship education, and about his modest career beginnings. When Oliver mentioned he still drove his battered old car from university, Lady Evelyn had smiled tightly, as if trying to be gracious about a child's naive story. Still, Eliza had held on to hope that time would change things, that when her family saw how happy Oliver made her, they would come around. But now, with the cancelled engagement party, the truth was impossible to ignore. Their love was never going to be enough for the Montgomerys, unless it fit into their narrow, privileged mold. It was only 2 days later when Eliza's phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. A text that stopped her mid-step on her way out of a client meeting. "Sorry about the glass house, but at least it'll still get used for something fun. Mum's going all out for my birthday this year. Should be stunning." Eliza read it twice, her heart pounding, before the meaning sank in like a punch to the stomach. The glass house, the venue that had been too expensive and unnecessary for her engagement party, was now being lavishly prepared for Charlotte's birthday celebration. Not a wedding, not an engagement, a birthday. Hands trembling, Eliza shoved her phone into her bag and hailed a cab, her thoughts swirling. Within the hour, she was walking up the manicured driveway to the Montgomery family estate in Hampstead, the house that had been both her gilded cage and childhood home. Inside, she found her mother, Lady Evelyn, and Sir Reginald seated with an event planner, surrounded by swatches of floral arrangements and elegant invitation designs. As if sensing Eliza's arrival, Lady Evelyn turned, her expression one of mild surprise, as though she hadn't expected Eliza to confront them so directly. "Eliza, darling, we weren't expecting you," she said smoothly, gesturing to a chair she clearly didn't expect her daughter to take. Eliza stayed standing. "So, you're hosting Charlotte's birthday at the glass house," she said evenly, though her voice shook slightly. A loaded silence filled the room before Sir Reginald responded, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored shirt. "Yes, it's a perfect venue. We've invited some important families, the Ashfords, of course, and a few potential business partners." Eliza's chest tightened. "So, Rupert Ashford would be there too?" "Of course, but not for my engagement party," she said sharply, her gaze locked on her father's unreadable expression. "You cancelled my event because it was too expensive. But now it's good enough for Charlotte's birthday?" Sir Reginald didn't flinch. Instead, he looked her in the eye and said, without apology, "There's a difference between Charlotte's future and yours. Eliza, we're protecting what's important." Eliza's stomach twisted. "Because Oliver's not good enough," she whispered, the truth heavy on her tongue. Lady Evelyn's polite mask slipped for a moment. "Eliza, be reasonable. Your life, your choices, they reflect on all of us. And Oliver, he simply doesn't belong in our world." Eliza stared at them both, realizing they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. This wasn't about money or venue limitations. It was about control, about who she was allowed to love, and what kind of life they thought she deserved. Without another word, she turned on her heel and left, the finality of their rejection crashing over her like ice. By the time Eliza returned to her loft apartment in Shoreditch, the adrenaline that had fueled her confrontation was gone, leaving behind a hollow ache in her chest. She stood in the kitchen, staring blankly at the kettle as it boiled, her hands trembling as she reached for a cup. When Oliver walked in, still in his work clothes, sleeves rolled up, tie slightly loosened, he took one look at her pale face and knew something was wrong. "Eliza?" he asked softly. Setting down his laptop bag, she turned to him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, and shook her head. "They've given my party to Charlotte," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "The same venue, the same date almost. Like my engagement, like we, don't even matter." Oliver crossed the room and gently took the mug from her hands. Setting it aside, "Come here," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. She let herself collapse against his chest, burying her face in his shoulder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Eliza just breathed him in, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding her as her mind reeled. "Maybe they're right," she finally said in a broken voice. "Maybe I've been deluding myself, thinking that if I just gave them time, they would accept you, accept us." Oliver leaned back slightly to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "Hey," he said gently, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You don't believe that?" Eliza let out a shaky breath, fighting the lump in her throat. "I don't know. Maybe I've been pretending that I could have both, my family and you. But now I see, I can't." Oliver held her gaze for a moment, then gave a small, sad smile. "Eliza, I've always known they didn't think I was enough. But you never made me feel that way. Not once. That's what mattered to me." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something, then added, "And there's something I've been meaning to tell you. I just didn't know when." She looked up, confused. "What is it?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "The company, my startup, we're finalizing a deal. A big one. Orion Medtech is buying us out." Eliza blinked, stunned. "Buying you out? But I thought," he gave a small laugh. "I know. I've kept it quiet because of the legal side. But it's real, Eliza. The deal closes next week. They're buying the whole platform for £210 million. Eliza stared at him, her mouth falling open. You're serious?" Oliver nodded, dead serious. "But that's not why I wanted to tell you. I don't want you to think you have to choose between love and success. You can have both, even if they don't see it." Tears welled up again, but this time for a different reason. In that moment, Eliza realized how much strength she had standing next to him, that love wasn't about pleasing others, but about choosing each other. Every day, against all odds. The next morning, Eliza sat at her kitchen table, staring at her untouched cup of tea, the events of the past days swirling in her mind like a storm she couldn't outrun. Oliver was moving about the flat, quietly gathering papers for a meeting, but Eliza knew he was watching her, waiting for her to say something. She was exhausted, tired of the fight, of trying to convince her family that love was worth more than a last name or a bank balance. And yet, deep down, a small flame of determination was starting to burn. When Oliver finally sat down beside her, she looked up, her eyes clearer than they had been the night before. "I want to go to that party," she said suddenly, her voice steady despite the weight behind the words. Oliver blinked, surprised. "Charlotte's party? At the Glass House?" She nodded. "Yes. If they expect me to disappear quietly, to act like I'm ashamed of us, they're wrong." Oliver studied her for a moment, and a slow smile spread across his face, not a smug one, but a proud, soft smile that told her he knew exactly how hard this decision was for her. "Are you sure?" he asked, though his tone already carried the hope that she wouldn't back down. "They'll stare, they'll whisper, and it'll be uncomfortable." Eliza's lips twitched into a half-smile. "I know, but I'm tired of pretending. If they want to act like you don't belong, like I've made some awful mistake, then they can say it to my face, but I won't hide." She reached for his hand across the table, threading her fingers with his. "We'll walk in together, and they'll see us, whether they like it or not." Oliver squeezed her hand gently, his eyes warm. "Then we do it together." His calm acceptance, his unwavering presence, only made her resolve stronger. She looked at him, realizing that he had always been willing to stand beside her in the storm, and now it was her turn to stand for him. For them both. Later that day, as Eliza sat designing digital invitations for the new, more intimate rooftop engagement celebration at Skygarden, she felt a sense of purpose growing inside her. This party, their party, would be real. Surrounded by people who supported them without question. But first, they would face her family on their own turf. And this time, Eliza would not shrink away. The night of Charlotte's birthday party arrived. And as Eliza stepped out of the cab in front of the glasshouse, a sharp wind from the Thames tugged at her coat, though it did little to cool the fire burning in her chest. Beside her, Oliver adjusted the sleeves of his simple button-down shirt, refusing Eliza's suggestion to dress up just for appearances. They had agreed, if they were going to walk into the lion's den, they would do so as themselves, unapologetically. The glass house glittered behind them, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering city skyline and the elite guests already mingling over champagne. For a brief moment, Eliza hesitated, nerves clawing at her, but Oliver reached for her hand. Steady and reassuring. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She drew a deep breath. "Ready." As they walked into the grand room, conversations hushed mid-sentence, heads turned, eyes wide with surprise, and then narrowed with judgment as they took in the unexpected guests. Lady Evelyn Montgomery was the first to notice them, her perfectly painted smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she glided over. Champagne flute in hand. "Eliza, Oliver, what a surprise," she said in a honeyed tone that didn't match her sharp eyes. "I wasn't aware you'd be joining us this evening." Eliza returned the smile, though hers was edged with steel. "We wouldn't miss celebrating Charlotte," she said smoothly. "Family occasion, after all." Across the room, Sir Reginald watched the scene unfold with narrowed eyes, his hand tightening around his glass. Charlotte approached next, visibly startled but trying to keep her composure, glancing nervously between her sister and their mother. "Eliza, you came," she said awkwardly. Eliza leaned in, kissed her cheek. "Of course. Happy birthday." But before Charlotte could respond, the room's attention shifted to a new arrival, Victoria Sinclair, CEO of Orion Medtech. Eliza recognized her from articles and news profiles, powerful, sharp, and one of the most influential figures in biotech. To everyone's shock, Victoria's eyes lit up when she spotted Oliver, cutting across the floor with a wide smile. "Oliver Patel, I was hoping I'd see you here," she said warmly, giving him a genuine hug. Whispers rippled through the guests. Lady Evelyn blinked rapidly, caught completely off guard, while Sir Reginald's jaw visibly tightened. "Victoria," Oliver greeted, returning the hug. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." Victoria laughed. "Please, after what we're finalizing, I couldn't miss a chance to celebrate early. You know everyone in the industry is talking about the Orion acquisition." Gasps and murmurs swelled around them. Eliza watched as her mother's face went pale, her smile now frozen in place. Sir Reginald, realizing what Victoria was saying, strode over, inserting himself into the conversation. "Acquisition?" he echoed, trying to sound casual, but Eliza could hear the strain in his voice. Victoria, oblivious to the tension, turned to him with a bright smile. "Yes, didn't you know? Orion is acquiring Oliver's company next week, a £210 million deal." Quite the achievement. Silence fell. Even Charlotte looked stunned, glancing at Eliza with wide eyes. Sir Reginald recovered first, forcing a smile. "Well, I wasn't aware, but impressive," he said, now studying Oliver like a man seeing a stranger for the first time. "Perhaps we should sit down and talk about opportunities." Eliza's stomach turned. She recognized the shift immediately, the sudden interest now that Oliver was valuable to them. But Oliver didn't answer, glancing at Eliza instead, as if giving her the lead. Eliza straightened, her voice calm but cutting. "Funny how quickly people's opinions change when there's money involved," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Lady Evelyn flushed, but Sir Reginald's eyes darkened. "We were never against you, Eliza," he said smoothly, "only wanted what's best for you." She smiled coldly. "No, you wanted what's best for you. And if Oliver weren't standing here today as a man you think you can profit from, you'd still call him unworthy. So no, we won't be sitting down to discuss opportunities. We came to support Charlotte. That's all." With that, she took Oliver's hand, and they walked away from her stunned parents. The power dynamic forever changed. To Eliza's surprise, Charlotte arrived too, not with Rupert Ashford, but with Marcus, her longtime secret boyfriend, whose hand she held tightly as though daring anyone to question it. Eliza caught her sister's eye across the room, and Charlotte gave her a small, almost shy smile, an unspoken apology, and perhaps even a thank you. Eliza returned the smile, warmth blooming in her chest. Maybe Charlotte wasn't ready to stand up to their parents yet, but she had taken a step. And for that, Eliza was grateful. Oliver stood beside her, looking out over the skyline, his hand resting gently at the small of her back. He had chosen to wear exactly what he always did, a crisp but simple shirt, dark jeans, and seeing him there, relaxed and confident among their friends, Eliza felt nothing but pride. As the last rays of sun dipped behind the city's silhouette, Oliver gently tapped a glass to get everyone's attention. The rooftop quieted as guests turned to face them. "I wanted to say a few words," Oliver began, his voice steady but warm, eyes fixed lovingly on Eliza. "This past week has reminded me of what really matters. Not money, or status, or who gets written up in some society page, but love. And loyalty. And standing up for what you believe in." He paused, glancing around the crowd. "Eliza has shown me more strength and grace than anyone I know. And I feel so lucky to be the man standing beside her tonight." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes, but she smiled, squeezing his hand. "I used to think I had to be someone else to be accepted," she said when she took the floor. "But what I've learned is that the people who truly love you never ask you to be anything but yourself. Tonight isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about celebrating love that doesn't come with conditions." As the guests erupted into cheers and applause, Eliza leaned in to kiss Oliver, feeling freer than she ever had. This was her life, her choice. And as they danced under the London sky, surrounded by people who cared, she knew they had built something far stronger than what she had left behind, a life of love, respect, and truth. The story teaches that true love and self-worth should never be measured by wealth, status, or others' approval. Eliza learns that standing up for herself and her relationship means rejecting conditional love and embracing her own values. She realizes that family should accept you for who you are, not for what benefits them, and that real success lies in being true to oneself and the people who genuinely care. Ultimately, the story reminds us that choosing love, integrity, and authenticity over superficial expectations leads to a more fulfilling and honest life.